If you think modern heating is the peak of human engineering, this story is going to bother you. Because centuries before thermostats, steel furnaces, or insulation foam, rural families in the coldest parts of Eurasia were quietly running a heat system so efficient it made firewood behave like a renewable resource. Not a myth, not folklore. Hard records, estate logs, household accounts. And when engineers finally studied it seriously, they had to admit something uncomfortable. This old brick monster was doing things modern systems still struggle to match. This wasn't comfort tech. This was survival engineering at its sharpest. The Russian stove didn't just heat homes. It stretched fuel so far that one winter's supply could last 3 times longer than what most modern households burn today. And it did it with dirt-simple physics applied ruthlessly well. Let's get straight into why this thing worked, why it embarrassed Western heating designs for centuries, and how you can still steal its principles today. Across northern Russia, from the 1600s through the 1800s, winter wasn't just a season. It was, well, half the year. Temperatures stayed below freezing for months at a time. Snow stacked up, rivers locked solid. And yet historical records show something rather strange. These households used far less firewood than their Western counterparts. That really shouldn't have been possible. Western Europe burned wood like it was disposable. Open fireplaces, straight chimneys, flames roaring upward with the heat following the smoke straight out of the house. Cosy to look at, yes, but catastrophic in efficiency. Russian households didn't have that luxury, you know. Forests weren't endless. Transport was, well, brutal. Every log mattered, and that pressure produced a heating system that treated every single calorie of wood like gold. The stove wasn't decoration, not at all. It was an engine. The core innovation was hidden, really. You couldn't see it unless you tore the stove apart. Instead of letting hot gases rise and escape, builders carved an internal labyrinth inside thick brick walls. When a fire burned, smoke didn't shoot straight up. It was forced sideways, then downward, then sideways again, then up, over and over, just like that. Each turn stripped heat from the gas. Each detour transferred energy into the brick mass. By the time smoke reached the chimney, it was barely warm. That alone flipped the math of heating. Modern fireplaces lose most of their heat through the flue. The Russian stove treated the flue like the last possible exit after the stove had taken everything it could. This is the same principle used today in rocket mass heaters and masonry stoves. The difference is that Russian builders refined it generations earlier, without equations, without sensors, purely through survival-driven trial and error. You know, metal stoves heat up fast, and well, they cool down just as quickly. That's really their fatal flaw, if you think about it. The Russian stove was absolutely massive, several tons of brick and stone, in fact. All that mass would absorb heat slowly, and then, quite remarkably, release it even slower. Families would fire the stove once or twice a day, seal it up, and then simply let it radiate a steady warmth for, 24 hours or more. No constant feeding, no midnight refueling, no frantic wood consumption. Quite a relief, really. You know, photographs from the early 20th century actually show families sleeping directly on top of the stove platform. It's quite remarkable to imagine, isn't it? This right here is thermal storage in its purest form. If you want heat that truly lasts, you don't chase speed. You build inertia. Brick, stone, cob, earth. Really, anything that can soak up energy and just refuse to let it go quickly. Another overlooked detail was the firebox itself. Western designs encouraged flames to rise vertically. The Russian stove, on the other hand, kept the fire low and horizontal. This changed combustion behaviour entirely. Hot gases mixed longer, and unburned particles reburned. Flame temperatures, well, they stayed high. If you've ever built a Dakota fire hole or experimented with a rocket stove, you've seen this effect. Confinement improves combustion. Chaos, on the other hand, wastes fuel. Modern ultra-efficient stoves use this same principle, but, you know, they're wrapped in steel and a fair bit of marketing these days. The Russians, however, perfected it with clay, brick, and, well, a lot of experience. The takeaway is, honestly, brutal in its simplicity. Don't burn more wood. Burn it better. Calling it a heater really undersells it. The Russian stove cooked food. Its slow, even heat made nutrient-dense stews and grains possible with minimal fuel. It dried clothes and boots without scorching them. It even preserved herbs. It warmed bedding. And, you know, it served as a recovery bed during illness. Every calorie pulled double or triple duty. That's the mindset modern survival systems often miss, you know. Efficiency isn't just fuel savings, it's multifunctionality. If you're designing a heat source today, ask what else it can do. Can it support a heated bench for sleeping, perhaps? Can residual heat dry clothing? Can it slow cook food after the fire is out? Waste isn't just smoke. Waste is unused opportunity. What makes this stove truly uncomfortable for modern engineers is how long it stayed competitive. Even as steel furnaces spread across Europe, Russian masonry stoves continued to outperform many industrial systems in fuel economy. Studies conducted in the early 20th century showed dramatically lower wood consumption for equivalent heat output. Right up through World War II, these stoves remained common in rural areas not because people were backward, but because the design worked. Engineers didn't improve on it. They just made it faster, smaller, and more convenient at the cost of efficiency. That trade-off made sense when fuel was cheap. It makes less sense now. This wasn't accidental genius, it was generational refinement under pressure. Every curve, chamber and channel reflects a culture that had to survive winter after winter with finite resources. Luxury didn't shape this design. Necessity did. And that's the real lesson. Fuel longevity isn't about hoarding firewood. It's about shaping your environment to hold on to heat once you've made it. Build for mass. Trap heat. Rebate gases. Make every BTU work over time. Those principles apply anywhere, you know. A cabin, a workshop, a bug-out shelter, even a temporary winter camp. You don't need to recreate a full Russian stove brick by brick to use this knowledge. Start by prioritizing thermal mass near your heat source. Brick surrounds, stone benches, even thick earthen walls can store heat. So, when designing flue paths, it's important to make sure that the hot gases are forced to travel a bit before they exit. You want to include horizontal runs and maybe even add some baffles. Turns that slow the smoke down can really help too. Now, for combustion chambers, you should keep them tight and controlled. The goal is to encourage complete burns, not just big, roaring flames. So, use residual heat intentionally. You know, cook after the fire has died down. Dry your gear above those warm surfaces. And, well, sleep near stored heat instead of always chasing after open flames. The goal isn't nostalgia, it's performance. People survived brutal winters with just a fraction of the fuel we burn today because, honestly, their systems just worked. No wasted motion, no wasted heat. That's exactly why modern science still circles back to this design. Not to romanticize it, but really to relearn what actually worked. If you care about forgotten engineering, real-world survival systems, and history that actually teaches you something useful, you're in the right place. Subscribe to Old World Prep. Share this with someone who still thinks efficiency started in the 20th century. And let's keep this knowledge alive because, well, the cold hasn't gone anywhere.